candle flame breathing. Mr. 3 took the lead in attacking, and rushed to the front of the 3 killers in white dresses at an extremely fast speed, raised a giant fist with a burning candle, and hammered it out. Boom. Under the detonation of the micro-explosives, the scorching heat generated by the burning candle exploded in an instant, illuminating the dark underground 6th-floor prison, reflecting the excitement and madness on the faces of many prisoners around. Okay. Mr. 3, who swung out with one blow, frowned slightly, his eyes turned slightly, and landed on the billowing smoke formed by the explosion in front of his arm. Suddenly, a red light flashed in his eyes. After catching the dangerous aura through knowledge and arrogance, Mr. 3 raised his hand without hesitation, creating a thick wall of candles in front of him. At the same time as the candle wall was formed, the huge poisonous dragon with scarlet body and pale eyes broke through the layers of smoke, and culled it with an extremely arrogant attitude. Boom. The crimson poisonous dragon collided with the gray-white candle wall, and after a violent shake, accompanied by a faint red smoke, there was a constant squeak, 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 corrosive sound. Even a candle that has been strengthened cannot completely resist Magellan's red venom? Looking at the corroded candle wall, although the speed is not very fast, Mr. 3 is still a little surprised. The candle that hadn't been strengthened 2 years ago was barely able to resist the red venom for a second or two. Logically speaking, it should be hard to be affected by the red venom after being strengthened to the current level. After thinking about it, the only reasonable explanation is that Magellan's fruit ability has been strengthened by a lot of training during the past 2 years. That's a bit tricky. Mr. 3 frowned slightly. Just as he was thinking about how to take down Magellan as quickly as possible, a few white figures flashed behind him. It was the 3 killers sent by the Tianlong people. Mr. 3 sensed their approach, but did not take any countermeasures. Go to hell, you bastard who messed up our plans. One of the killers pulled out a flintlock gun from his white suit, pointed it at Mr. 3's head and pulled the trigger. Boom. A crisp voice sounded. The killer's expression changed slightly as he looked at the flintlock gun that had been pierced through the barrel beforehand. Just a moment ago, he seemed to see a picture of a jelly bean flashing by. Whizzing. Seeing that the shooting failed, the other 2 killers made a quick decision, drew out their sabers around their waists, covered them with armed colors, and quickly rushed in front of Mr. 3 with the 6th style, shaving, of the Navy, and slashed down with their knives. When the sparks of the weapon collision burst out, and Katakuri, holding the special weapon Earth Dragon Trident, arrived at a faster speed, perfectly blocking the slashes of the 2 killers. Katakuri, having a teammate like you is really reassuring. Mr. 3, who had been aware of it for a long time, showed a faint smile. At least we are allies who live and die together now, aren't we? Because of the loss of the scarf, it can be seen very clearly that the corners of Katakuri's mouth are slightly raised at this time. He also smiled. Obviously, Mr. 3, who was aware of the killer's attack, knew that he, who had the ability to foresee the future, would stop the attack, so he stood still and did not move. For him, this is a kind of cooperation, and it is a great trust. If you have time to chat there, why not do it as soon as possible and kill all these reckless guys? In the distance, Crocodile, who was biting a cigar, had completed charging, raised his hand and threw out his signature move, Strengthen Sha Lan. The sandstorm the size of a palm expanded rapidly after letting go, reaching a height of several meters in the blink of an eye. Whoosh. Before Sha Lan swept the 3 killers, the warden Domino rushed out from the side of the candle wall, brandishing the weapon in his hand to create a strong shock wave, and knocked the ever-increasing power of the sandstorm into yellow sand flying all over the sky. Being able to take over the position of Rainstream as the new warden, her strength is not weak. Crocodile, Katakuri, you just need to get rid of these people, and Magellan will leave it to me. Seeing that the candle wall in front of him was corroded badly, Mr. 3 raised his hand and created a new candle wall. Mr. 3, can you do it? That guy's red venom is not easy to deal with. Katakuri, who had fought against Magellan, asked in a deep voice. It should be possible. Compared to yours, my ability is still able to restrain Magellan. Mr. 3 said with a serious expression, and he is not in full condition now, at least he has no problem stopping it. This is not to be a hero, and it is currently the most reasonable allocation for him to fight against Magellan. As long as he can hold Magellan, Katakuri and Crocodile, it is only a matter of time before Domino and Sanmi Killer are solved. At that time, the 3 of them will join forces to fight against Magellan, and things will become much simpler. Understood. Katakuri, who knew the truth, said no more, his eyes fixed. The arm holding the Earth Dragon Trident changed into a ball of glutinous rice spinning at high speed, pushing the two white-clothed killers away with tyrannical force. Then, he raised his leg and kicked the gunman with a sticky kick, forcing the three to retreat in the direction of Crocodile. Crocodile, who was also aware of Mr. Three's strategy, naturally would not refute, and raised his arms in coordination, turning all the passages on both sides into yellow sand, and swept towards Domino and the three killers. Boom! The yellow sand instantly submerged their tiny bodies. In the next second, the domineering glutinous rice donut with advanced armed colors exploded with super speed punches, which scattered the yellow sand and forced the four of Domino to retreat to the other side of the sixth prison. Because of this, Katakuri joined Crocodile, and the two of them looked at each other, and then broke out a powerful move, rushing forward to fight fiercely with the four Dominos who stabilized their figures. The terrifying battle fluctuations spread in all directions, and the prisoner on the opposite side, who was able to stand leisurely in the cell watching the show before, was suddenly shocked and said, "Don't come here." On Mr. Three's side, the prisoners who had completely given up their lives in the fierce battle immediately regained their spirits when they saw this. While enduring the poisonous brilliance, they pouted their buttocks and whistled cheerfully, full of ridicule. Ha ha ha. On the opposite side, let's experience the taste of glutinous rice and yellow sandbags, ah ha ha ha. Should it be said that he is a sixth-tier prisoner? This kind of psychological quality is no one else. Mr. Three was complaining about these vicious prisoners in his heart, but the new candle wall in front was smoking, bursting out dense cracks like spider webs. Immediately afterwards, there was a bang, and it was completely shattered, revealing Magellan standing opposite, covered in red poison. Mr. Three, the guy the first chased and fled around 2 years ago, I didn't expect to grow up to this point. Magellan's voice was low and full of cold-killing intent. He was quite impressed with Mr. Three, a wax-fruit-capable person. If it hadn't been for this guy's candle creation to delay a lot of time 2 years ago, maybe all those damn jailbreakers would have stayed in the city of advancement, with no possibility of escape. Therefore, for Mr. Three, Magellan has a very heavy hatred. I can feel it, Magellan, you regret letting us run away. Mr. Three revealed the scar on the opposite side without changing his expression. For the insidious and cunning third brother, this kind of thing has no psychological burden at all. So this time, I will never let you leave here alive again. Magellan's eyes gleamed with a poisonous scarlet light. It is a great insult to him who has always been dedicated to his duties for the former prison escapee to go to Jinjin City so arrogantly to make a scene. Hell's verdict, the blood-red poisonous dragon. Whoosh. Under the blessing of boundless anger, a crimson poisonous dragon with a body length of more than 10 meters slowly raised its head from behind Magellan covered in red venom. Blooming with the ultimate dangerous aura, the hollow and pale Longan is high above, overlooking the tiny Mr. Three below. The moment Mr. Three was stared at by the scarlet poisonous dragon, Mr. Three's steady breathing rhythm faltered. This oppressive feeling of facing death is really too strong. In this regard, he chose the simplest and most brutal way of confrontation, confrontationally. Fluid candles continuously spewed out from under his feet, converging, expanding, and then compressing behind his back from bottom to top. A few seconds later, the gray-white dragon head full of coercion condensed into shape, and rushed to the 6th-floor ceiling under the support of the fluid candle, then slowly lowered its head, staring at the scarlet poisonous dragon opposite. Mr. Three tilted his head slightly, and lit the fluid candle through the flame above his head. Hum. In an instant, the blazing flame ignited the monotonous candle dragon, making it a flaming candle dragon bathed in endless firelight. Sizzle sizzle. The sound of burning candles dripping was like the most terrifying roar from hell. The raging flame candle dragon moved slightly, and opened its huge mouth that wanted to devour everything. Looking at Magellan's shocked eyes, the corners of Mr. Three's mouth that controls candle dragon slightly twitched. Come and see, Magellan, is your crimson venom more corrosive, or my candle flame? This recruit is called Candle Demon Flaming Candle Dragon. Puff puff puff. Facing the candle dragon rising with endless flames, the scarlet poisonous dragon also showed its horror. Numerous highly poisonous bubbles emerged from the red venom, bursting out like billowing magma. The splashed venom fell on the ground, and the hard special floor tiles were corroded and perforated. Falling on the stone railings of the Hailu in the surrounding cells, the railings melted immediately. Even so, the two prisoners hiding inside didn't intend to run away at all, but subconsciously shrunk to a more corner area. Not only are they now firmly bound by Halushi handcuffs, they were also previously devastated by Magellan's purple venom. It's good to be able to keep your will sober now, how dare you run out to die? The safest place right now is the cell. No, the cell may not be very safe. The two embracing each other raised their heads, seeing that even the space was distorted by the flames of the candles in front of them and replaced by the crimson poisonous mist. The color of despair involuntarily appeared on the ferocious faces. Damn it. Being in the middle of these two people is really bad luck for 8 lifetimes. The giant flaming candle dragon and the giant scarlet poisonous dragon will not take care of their emotions. The two were equal to each other, occupying the slightly narrow front and rear areas of the passage. Be tortured to death in the endless poison, Mr. 3. Magellan drank a lot, his aura climbed to the extreme, and he took the lead in controlling the poisonous dragon to attack. Try it if you have the ability. Mr. 3 didn't dare to push it too far, and exerted the 100% accuracy and 100% hardness of the fruit ability to the limit, compressing the entire candle dragon to a high degree, and when it reached the limit, it shot out like a spring. Boom. The red poisonous dragon and the flaming candle dragon roared, approached quickly in midair and collided with each other in an unreasonable and domineering posture. Sizzle. The moment the two sides came into contact, the flaming candle dragon, whose speed and intensity were more dominant, pushed the red poisonous dragon back steadily. The raging candle flames crazily burned the venom, causing it to boil violently like boiling water. After all, it was the highest fighting force in the city. Magellan stepped on the ground and instantly stabilized the decline. Whoosh whoosh. The extremely aggressive venom began to exert force, corroding candle dragon's head little by little, dyeing it a dismal dark red hue. The burning properties of the candle are thereby obliterated. Without the blessing of the flame, only the high-hardness candles are barely able to resist the venom attack, but as time goes by, the trend of decay becomes more and more obvious. Even, the red poison spread along Candle Dragon's body, almost touching Mr. 3's body. This enhanced version of red venom is really not so easy to deal with. Mr. 3 sighed softly, looked up at the approaching Crimson Viper, and a large amount of fluid candles began to ooze from his right arm. Layers of fluid candles condensed and turned into ever-growing candle fists. At the same time that the poisonous dragon completely crushed the candle dragon and rushed towards him with a roar, Mr. 3's big candle flame breathing was just completed. Candle flame breathing. The candle fire fist mixed with micro-explosives pierced the dragon's head fearlessly, and after a brief expansion, the explosive power was fully released. Boom. There was a deafening explosion, and the terrifying poisonous dragon was blown to pieces, and countless scarlet venoms were scattered, scaring the prisoners in the nearby cells. This is not over yet. The tiny candle block formed by the explosion flew towards Magellan not far away under the action of inertia. HMPH, boring trick. Magellan snorted softly, and the red venom covering his whole body sprayed out, intercepting all the tiny pieces of candles. Bang 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 bang. The candle blocks exploded one after another, with a lot of momentum, but they couldn't hurt Magellan at all. Looking at Mr. 3, who was also holding a candle shield to block the splashing venom, Magellan frowned slightly. In this brief confrontation, the red venom he was proud of did not have the upper hand. The eyeballs rolled and glanced into the distance. I saw that under the joint attack of Crocodile and Katakuri, Domino and the 3 killers were beaten back steadily and could only barely parry. Things are going in a pretty bad direction. Therefore, Magellan made a decisive decision, fully activated the fruit ability, and decided to solve Mr. 3 as quickly as possible. Poison Dragon. The red to slightly black venom erupted behind Magellan, condensing into 3 super poisonous dragons that were bigger and more oppressive than before. Mr. 3's eyes were solemn, and a large number of fluid candles continuously spewed out from under his feet. He just wanted to use the big move Candle Purgatory to fight against the poisonous dragon, but when he looked down and saw Magellan bathed in red venom, he silently took the diffused candle back into his body. The spreading speed of Magellan's red poison is really too fast. Rashly unfolding the Candle Purgatory will cause fire on the body instead, providing the venom with an excellent erosion attack route. From the point of view of Candle Purgatory alone, Magellan's venom, in turn, restrained Mr. 3's performance. Before Mr. 3 could think of a more precise countermeasure, 3 scarlet poisonous dragons roared towards him. Candle Dragon. In desperation, Mr. 3 had no choice but to take the second place and create 3 identical candle dragons to fight. Strangely, this time he did not light the candle dragon. Bang bang bang. Puff puff. 6 dragon-shaped monsters collided fiercely over the passageway of the 6th-floor prison. The red venom and white wax continued to splash, dyeing the entire area between Magellan and Mr. 3 into a red and white hell on earth. Due to the threat of the red venom, Mr. 3 can only fight and retreat to avoid being accidentally contaminated. This level of poison, even the slightest touch will be fatal. As for why not use armed color to resist? Because it is a pity that the domineering armed color is also powerless in front of Magellan's red venom, and you will die if you touch it. Here, refer to 2 years ago. Although there are incomplete settings, but including Ivankov and others were chased away by purple poison, it can be seen that the armed color is mostly useless. Here is a patch. Compared with Mr. 3's slow retreat, Magellan is pressing forward step by step without fear, controlling 3 poisonous dragons to launch fierce attacks continuously. Just like that, Mr. 3 retreated to a corner of a cell a little bit. Until there is no way back, Magellan stared indifferently at Mr. 3, who was firmly locked by 3 poisonous dragons from 3 directions, and a deep and cold voice came out slowly. It's over. Okay. Just when he controlled the poisonous dragon and wanted to give Mr. 3 a fatal blow, he suddenly realized it belatedly. His forward legs were completely blocked by the hard candle block, and it was difficult to break free for a while. Whoosh whoosh. The candle liquid that was shot down to the ground by the poisonous dragon gathered around it as if consciously. Magellan's pupils turned, and his movements were limited, he could only watch the gray candle covering his entire body. Hey, don't underestimate my precision control over candles, Magellan. Mr. 3 raised his fingers that were stained with candle liquid, and wiped the flames of the hairstyle on top of his head. Then flicked lightly, and the burning candle fluid traced a graceful parabola in the air, and landed on Magellan, who was covered by the candle accurately. Magellan's pupils shrank slightly, and his face changed in shock. Because, from the candle block on his body, he saw dense black spots. Obviously, it is a micro-explosive with great lethality. So, it wasn't too late just now, but did you deliberately not light the candle dragon? To act so realistically in panic and haste. Knowing that it was impossible to avoid the candle's explosive attack, Magellan turned ruthless, and simply gave up all defenses. 1 second before the micro-explosives were detonated, 3 poisonous dragons were controlled to rush towards Mr. 3. Mr. 3 cooperated with the candle wall to dodge with difficulty. Although he avoided the killing of the 2 poisonous dragons, he was careless and was pierced through half of his body by the last remaining poisonous dragon. At the same time, Magellan's body candle block laced with micro-explosives was completely ignited. Boom boom boom. A series of explosions resounded throughout the 6th floor. Ah! Immediately after the serial explosions, Mr. 3's screams followed. Just a little bit of Magellan's purple venom can make most of the prisoners on the 5th and 6th floors miserable, let alone the more toxic red venom. Moreover, the area touched by Mr. 3's scarlet poisonous dragon was not just a tiny spot, but a whole half of his body. Under the strong poisonous erosion, even he who possessed the overlord look and domineering spirit couldn't help showing a look of extreme pain. His 5 sense organs were twisted together, roaring and howling. He lay down on the ground and rolled crazily. A tall and mighty figure slowly stepped out of the billowing smoke formed by the candle explosion. At this time, Magellan had blood hanging from the corner of his mouth, and the red venom covering his body was evaporated by the high temperature of the powerful explosion. The uniform of the deputy director he was wearing was in tatters, revealing the scorched skin inside. His gait was no longer as steady and powerful as before, and his body, which had already been broken by Katakuri, began to show some physical weakness after being attacked by Mr. 3's candle bomb. However, he still won this battle in the end. No matter how strong his physique was, he would not be able to remain unscathed if half of his body was pierced by the scarlet poisonous dragon. The extremely toxic venom will destroy the target's nervous system, sensory system, and even internal organs in a very short period of time. To be able to hurt me to such an extent, I have to say, Mr. 3, you have greatly exceeded my expectations. Unfortunately, that's the end of it for you. Magellan glanced at Mr. 3 lying on the ground in pain. Out of absolute confidence in his poison, he turned indifferently and walked towards Katakuri and Crocodile in another battlefield. The situation over there is quite pessimistic. Even if there is a delay here for a second, accidents may happen. Mr. 3. A red light flashed in Katakuri's eyes. He was the first to catch the bad situation on Mr. 3's side. He turned around and yelled loudly at Mr. 3, who was lying on the ground. Crocodile also sensed that something was wrong, and raised his hand to repel the oncoming domino with a cloud of sand. His legs turned into sandstorms and slowly lifted into the air, trying to rush over to check Mr. 3's status. There is a chance. Shave. The 2 swordsman killers who had been suppressed on purpose before showed their weakness. Immediately, he came behind Katakuri and Crocodile, who were distracted, and swung the domineering long knife covered in armed colors in their hands, drawing a gloomy cold light in the air. Puff. Blood gushed out immediately, staining the faces of Katakuri in crocodile red. The battle situation is changing rapidly. The cross-union, which was still in an absolute advantage before, fell into an absolute disadvantage in a few seconds. Magellan, who was walking in the passage of the prison, was covered in red poison, and was about to launch a fatal attack on Katakuri and Crocodile not far away, when suddenly a red light flashed in his eyes. With the blessing of knowledge and domineering, he had a premonition of the dangerous aura coming from behind, which made the hair all over his body stand upside down in an instant. In the next second, a murderous voice rang out accompanied by scalding heat. Candle double flame breathing. Magellan turned his head with a face full of shock, and what struck him was two giant fists with candle flames that occupied the entire field of vision. He wanted to dodge, but his body, which is not good at martial arts, couldn't keep up with the reaction. As soon as he made a move, he was hit by a huge candle fist on the face. A powerful and terrifying explosion followed. Boom. The burning candle liquid splashed in all directions, and the gray-white candle smoke filled the air, completely covering Magellan's huge body kneeling on his knees. On the other side, the two CP0 killers who attacked brazenly stared blankly at the wound on their chests that kept spurting blood. After a few seconds of pause, there was a plop, and he fell heavily on the ground, falling into a pool of blood, completely severing his breath of life. Magellan was seriously injured and knelt down, and the two assassins were instantly killed. The situation that was supposed to be reversed, was reversed again. Crocodile, has your domineering sense of knowledge reached the level of foreseeing the future? Katakuri took back the blood-stained earth dragon trident, and looked at Crocodile who was standing steadily back on the ground with surprise in his eyes. The reason why he turned around and yelled at Mr. 3 in the fierce battle was because he had foreseen what was going to happen next, and deliberately sold a flaw to the killer on the opposite side, luring the opponent to take the initiative to take down his defenses and attack, and then achieve an instant counter kill. But Crocodile, at the same time, made the same lure action, and killed CP0 with a big sword made of yellow sand. Ha ha. Crocodile took a puff of his cigar with a leisurely expression, and said, "When will the knowledge and knowledge that can foresee the future become exclusive to you, Katakuri?" Hearing this, Katakuri frowned slightly, staring at Crocodile silently. They have been fighting side by side since they came to the 6th floor. Although Crocodile's knowledge is not weak, there is still a long way to go to foresee the future. He trusts his own judgment. Crocodile felt a little guilty from the straightforward eyes, and after a light cough, the corners of his mouth rose slightly. It is rumored that a perfect man whose back will never touch the ground, how could he expose his back to enemies with weapons because of a mere accident? It was precisely after he captured this key information that he used his tricks and cooperated with him to make a fake move to quickly support Mr. 3. Katakuri, who got the truth, was stunned for a moment, looked at the man beside him who was blowing out smoke rings, and couldn't help but smile. Did you predict my foreseeable future, and then take decisive action? What a terrible man. Crocodile laughed, and added, there is another reason. His eyeballs rolled slightly and landed on Mr. 3 in the distance. Although I'm very upset, that guy is not like a man who will be killed easily. As Crocodile said, at this time Mr. 3 was standing still panting. Using high-intensity flame breathing several times consumes a lot of his physical strength and requires a short adjustment time. Other than that, I didn't see any other discomfort from his body. He was tall and straight, and his clothes were intact. He didn't look like he was attacked by Magellan's red venom at all. What's going on? After being pierced by Magellan's red poisonous dragon, Mr. 3 is not affected at all. The prisoners in the cage were full of disbelief. Having experienced Magellan's venom deeply, they didn't think that Mr. 3's physique was strong enough to ignore the severe poison. Even a special constitution that can be immune to common poisons is absolutely unable to compete with Magellan's red poison. Although they are all 6th-tier prisoners, there is also a huge gap in the strength of the people imprisoned here. Even Magellan walked away confidently. No matter how strong Mr. 3 is, if half of his body touches the red poison, he will only die. Soon, a strong man with sharp eyes pointed out Mr. 3's method. Of course, the premise is that you really get in touch with it. Take a good look at his feet. Hearing this, the perplexed prisoners looked down one after another, and with the help of the dim light, they saw a candle at Mr. 3's feet, which was dyed dark red by red poison, rapidly melting. Indistinctly, the outlines of some human figures can be seen. Use a candle to cover the body with a candle film to avoid direct contact with the venom? The prisoners who learned the truth widened their eyes and showed surprise. When exactly? They watched the whole battle between the two sides, and they couldn't figure out when Mr. 3 was covered with the candle film. At this time, the mysterious strong man stood up again, and muttered. When Magellan used the 3 poisonous dragons, a large number of gray and white candles spewed out from his feet, as if he was about to use some kind of move, and then he retracted it inexplicably. If you guessed correctly, since then, there has been a candle film on his body surface, otherwise he wouldn't have confidently used the candle dragon to fight. To be able to control the ability of Wawa fruit to such a fine level, Mr. 3, this guy really developed the ability of the fruit to the extreme, and reminiscent of Mr. 3's tragic howl after pretending to be poisoned just now, even laying down and rolling on the ground, the mysterious strong man's deep eyes flickered inexplicably. When I first appeared on the stage, I used the terrifying overlord look to shock the audience. Presumably, I also made preparations for this step. A man with the aura of a king above the pinnacle of the world would pretend to be lying and rolling on the ground. It's hard for anyone to believe this kind of thing. With this level of brain supplementation, the old Mr. 3 blushed when he heard it not far away. He didn't think so far at all. Okay. Sure enough, in addition to the lucky value on the panel, there must be hidden buff bonuses in the buggy camp. That's the brain supplement halo. Thanks to the relatively dark surroundings, otherwise people would have seen the blush on his face. As the person involved, Mr. 3 knew it well, so he was able to remain calm, but the group of unknown prisoners around him immediately boiled over. Hiss. I never expected that this Mr. 3 is such a despicable and cunning person? The domineering look on him is fake, right? I once challenged the white beard in his prime, but that guy has never used such insidious tricks. Brother, is there a possibility, that is, if Whitebeard hits you at his peak, one hand is enough, there is no need to resort to tricks at all? Ahem, no matter what, the insidiousness and cunning of Mr. 3 is quite to my liking. He is the chief of staff of the Cross Trade Union, who acts with his brain, can he not be insidious? The number 2 person is already so terrifying. How high has the president of the Cross Union, the clown buggy of the new 4 emperors, reached? Hey, Mr. 3, I'm interested in your cross guild, kill Magellan, and I'll give you a chance to invite me. Ahahaha, interesting, count me in. If the people imprisoned here are the just and awe-inspiring navy, then Mr. 3's insidious and cunning, in their eyes is definitely an extremely shameless behavior and cannot be put on the stage. But it's a pity that everyone locked up here is a notorious big pirate. They have been in the pirate world for many years and have experienced countless storms. Naturally, they are quite clear that in this chaotic sea, the sinister and cunning people are definitely more nourishing and shrewd than the bright and upright people. Especially pirates. And, more importantly, this insidious and cunning person actually has the potential to be a king, possessing the dominance of a king. 2 things that are difficult to appear at the same time appear in the same person. One can imagine how high his future achievements will reach. Ha 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 ha. In the luxurious single cell in the distance, Doflamingo couldn't help covering his face and letting out a frivolous laugh when he heard the self-righteous words of the guys around him. What a bunch of poor fellows, until now they still can't understand, the real protagonist on the stage of Advanced City. It's obviously him, Tenyasha, Doflamingo. The target that the Cross Guild wants to rescue must be himself as the former Shicibukai, and the target that Magellan wants to protect is himself, and even the killer sent by the Tinlongren is targeting himself. It's ridiculous how these stupid guys just yelled indiscriminately without knowing the situation. Compared with the other prisoners hiding in the corner of the cell, fearful of being involved in the battle between the two sides, Doflamingo's attitude is much more arrogant, directly pulling the chain and standing in front of the cell railing. Because he firmly believed that neither Magellan nor Mr. 3 would let go of their hands and feet completely and use a powerful ultimate move that could easily affect him. This can be verified from the fact that the other cells are either filled with poison or dripped with candles, while his side is quite clean and safe. Doflamingo was thinking confidently like this, and the next second, a loud slap was directly slapped on his face. Poison giant soldier judgment of hell. Amidst the muffled roar of Magellan, who was seriously injured, a giant skeleton bathed in dark red venom slowly rose up, touching the ceiling of the 6th-floor prison, standing proudly above the narrow passage. The huge body made of pure poison squeezed everything around it. Everything that comes into contact with its surface, whether it is the solid cell wall or the specially made steel chains, is eroded away in an instant and turned into a thick poisonous mist. A large amount of poisonous mist gushed out in an instant, superimposed with the poisonous mist generated during the previous battle with Mr. 3, forming a dense red mist that would cause hallucinations and weakness if ingested in a small amount, permeating the entire 6th floor. Mr. 3 backed away again and again, and the scene in front of him began to become hazy. In the battle just now, he inevitably inhaled a small amount of poisonous mist, and now he inhaled a large amount of poisonous mist. Even with an A+ physical fitness, he finally couldn't handle it. In such a narrow enclosed terrain, Magellan's ability should not be too abnormal. It's no wonder he was sent here by the world government to guard Advance City. I didn't want to use this trick at first, because it would inevitably lead to casualties of prisoners. Magellan, who was scarred on his back, stood in the center of the poison giant. At this moment, his eyes were scarlet, like a real judge of hell, and his eyes swept across the pale prisoners on both sides. As Doflamingo believed, for the safety of the prisoners, the previous Magellan really did not intend to use his strongest ultimate move. But the difficulty of Mr. 3 and others forced him to go all out. Rather than rescuing all the prisoners after the opponent defeated himself, it would be better to sacrifice some prisoners and keep the opponent here forever. This is the only option that Magellan can think of at the moment. Mr. 3 looked at the poisonous giant in front of him, and threw out the burning candle, and when the temperature of the candle was high enough, he took it back, covering his whole body to form a hot candle armor. The burning pain from all over his body brought his consciousness back to clarity for a short time. Knowing the horror of Magellan's poisonous giant, a large amount of fluid candles spewed out from his feet, forming a candle purgatory covering the entire 6th floor. Afterwards, all the fluid candles were retracted, and condensed into a giant candle sphere on the top of the head, and controlled with precision, it was compressed little by little toward the center. On the opposite side, Crocodile, who teamed up with Katakuri to defeat Domino and another CP0, recognized the move that Mr. 3 was about to perform before he had time to make up the knife. Hey! Mr. 3, are you serious? Do you want to use that trick in this kind of place? Crocodile shouted anxiously. He doesn't seem to be bluffing. Katakuri, who had never seen Mr. 3's move, probably foresaw what was going to happen next through his powerful knowledge. To Crocodile's shout, Mr. 3's answer was very simple and rude. Don't worry, Crocodile, those who can be locked up here are all monster-like guys. If they can't even survive this attack, it can only mean they are too weak to join us. Of course, this is just superficial. The truth is, he had to. The reason why they were able to make a big fuss and evacuate safely 2 years ago was because the top combat power of the Navy headquarters was all placed on the top to fight against Whitebeard, and they couldn't spare extra personnel to support the city. And it is obvious that in this chaotic period, no matter how battered the Navy is, it is still possible to transfer part of its combat power to the city of Advance, and there is even a high probability that a general will follow. Therefore, he must make a quick decision to completely incapacitate Magellan before the naval support arrives in Advance City and makes the whole situation troublesome. Damn you. You are so strong that you are even more like a monster. If you have the ability, you can put on Halushi handcuffs and try it in the station. Including the frightened Doflamingo, the prisoners in the prison yelled and cursed. There are also a small number of crazy people showing almost abnormal excitement. Is it hard to bet on whose life is harder? It's interesting, it's really interesting. However, there is not much time left for them to talk, only a buzz. The scorching and bright firelight, like a small sun, instantly illuminates the dark and damp 6th floor, like daytime. This is the last move, take it, Magellan, Candle Demon Great Flame Ring. Boom. The candle sun collided with the poison giant soldier, instantly shaking the bricks all over the floor into the air. The high temperature and high pressure wax mixed with scarlet poison formed a storm, which swept and exploded in all directions, making this place a real, infinite hell. The confrontation between the two sides lasted for a full 2 minutes. When the candles were extinguished, the poison dissipated, and the shock storm gradually subsided, the entire 6th underground floor was completely destroyed. The prison cage near the impact was even more fragmented, and the gravel rolled down. It was unknown whether the prisoners inside were dead or alive. And this situation is the result of Katakuri and Crocodile using their abilities to protect the prisons on both sides. From this we can see how powerful the two sides' unique moves are. The gunpowder smoke gradually faded, and the light here fell into depressing darkness again. Who? Mr. 3 supported the broken ground with both palms, panting heavily, dripping sweat continuously. Continuously using the fire-breathing fire for many times had consumed a lot of his physical strength, and this blow of the fire ring directly hollowed out his body, and he almost couldn't slow down. Moreover, using the Candle Demon Great Flame Ring in such a narrow terrain, part of the shockwave formed would fall on him, which would hurt the enemy 1000 and damage 200. But, Mr. 3 raised his head and looked forward, with a smile on his lips. I saw Magellan lying on the ground with his eyes turned white, and the terrifying red venom around his body had disappeared. The horn of the devil was broken, and the whole person lost consciousness, and his life and death were unknown. Under the flames of the candle, the king of hell was completely defeated. Ahahaha. This guy Mr. 3 actually defeated Magellan? Is this uncle finally leaving this damned place? Ha ha ha. The world, wealth, women, get ready for my debut. I can even guess tomorrow's headlines. The Crusaders will create history and break through the impregnable city known as the Iron Wall. Although some prisoners were comatose or even died in the impact just now, there are still many strong guys who survived, cheering there, as if they had escaped from the trap. Doflamingo, with a little wax splashed on his face, squatted on the spot, with an arrogant and menacing expression. He was expecting the invitation from the Crusades to his noble self. At that time, he only needs to pretend to accept the recruitment, and then he can follow Mr. 3 and the others and leave the ghostly place of Advanced City without incident. Waiting for the free sea outside, isn't the sky high enough to let the birds fly, and you can get away in minutes? After all, the world of pirates is full of deceit and betrayal. Ha 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 ha. Doflamingo wanted to laugh out loud at the thought of a free life where he could make a fuss in the future. It's a pity that he has to hold back now, because Mr. 3 has already walked towards him. It's been a long time, Chief of Staff of the Cross Guild. Doflamingo showed his trademark evil smile. Mr. 3 lowered his head slowly, staring indifferently at Doflamingo, one of the few impressive villains in One Piece. A sentence that Doflamingo said suddenly flashed in the back of my mind. Fur coat, cropped pants, I am Doflamingo, you remember. Cough cough, no, it is. Pirates are evil. Navy is justice. That notion has been rewritten countless times. Justice will win, that is inevitable, because only the winner can represent justice. Just from this sentence, we can get a glimpse of many unique concepts and charisma in Flamingo. Therefore, even though he is in a cage and possesses a domineering aura, the sense of oppression released from his whole body is still quite strong. Dealing with such an insidious and crazy guy, if you are not careful, you will definitely be eaten to the bone. Fortunately, Mr. 3 himself is also sinister and cunning. It seems that you already know about our existence. Although Mr. 3, who has read the original book, knows that Doflamingo's source of information is newspapers, and he even has the nickname of King of Newspapers, but he chooses a relatively conservative statement very carefully. If that's the case, then I don't need to explain so much. As you can see, Doflamingo, our cross guild is now recruiting the former Shicibukai. Mr. 3's eyes were deep, and he asked in a deep voice, how about it, do you want to join us? Ha 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 ha. Doflamingo burst out into a maniacal laugh. Tens of seconds later, the laughter stopped, but he said with a smile still on the corner of his mouth, I have seen your strength, and you really have the qualifications. Okay, I accept it. After all, I also want to turn this damn world upside down. Hearing this, Mr. 3 kept standing, blinked his eyes, and did not respond. Not to mention stepping forward to help Doflamingo untie the chains of Helushi. The atmosphere suddenly fell into a bewildered silence. The unexpected situation froze the smile on Doflamingo's face. What, is there a problem? Doflamingo, do I look like a fool? Mr. 3 raised his finger and pointed to his face. Doflamingo's face darkened, and he asked, what do you mean, don't you believe me? The acting is very realistic, and the expressions are also in place. But what he didn't know was that the person standing in front of him was also a highly skilled veteran. Not to mention, Mr. 3 has a super cheat like the system. If he really accepts it from the bottom of his heart, can the system be as quiet and yuppie as it is now, without any reaction at all? That's right, I just don't believe you. Mr. 3 didn't get used to Doflamingo, and said with the strongest posture, Doflamingo, I only give you 1 minute, there are still a lot of people waiting here. For an arrogant character like Doflamingo, if he gives in a little bit, he will make progress. Therefore, although the main purpose of Mr. 3's trip was to recruit Doflamingo to obtain system rewards, the method he chose was completely different from that of Hancock and Crocodile. How dare you talk to me in such a tone, the Chief of Staff of the Cross Union? What kind of onion do you think you are? Doflamingo's face showed anger. Mr. 3 turned a deaf ear to this. Well said, there are still 50 seconds. Doflamingo gritted his teeth for this more arrogant attitude than himself. Obviously, the toughness of the other party's attitude was far beyond his expectation. Seeing Doflamingo's expression, Mr. 3 felt that it was necessary to add fire. Brother Doflaming, you are a smart person. You should know that the current world structure is no longer the era when you can rely on your own strength alone. After saying these words, the expression on Doflamingo's face became even more gloomy. Although he only learned about the world through newspapers, he was as shrewd as he had already come to this conclusion. The original Shichibukai, who had been living extremely nourishingly before, needed to form a group to fight against foreign enemies. In this chaotic era, without a strong enough background, it is impossible to support one's ambitions. Just like before, he relies on Kaido, the strongest creature in the world. With the support of the beast's pirates, his underground weapons and arms trade can grow steadily. And now that Kaido has fallen, his support no longer exists. Thinking about it this way, the new 4 emperors are still a good choice, but... Doflamingo frowned. To be honest, he looked down on Buggy the Clown very much through his previous contact with Qiwuhai. Even if Buggy is now recognized by the Navy as a figure of the 4 emperors. Thinking of this, Doflamingo raised his eyes and looked at Crocodile and Katakuri not far away. Especially Crocodile, a man whom even he admired, and who was still sending out cooperation invitations on top of the war. He scratched his head and couldn't figure out that a guy like Crocodile was actually willing to join the Cross Union and submit to Buggy's subordinates. There are also Hancock, White 2, and even Hawkeye Mihawk. Even the domineering Mr. 3 in front of him is the same. Is it the unique charm that gathers many strong people around, or is it simply relying on luck beyond common sense? Are the guys who came out of Roger the Pirate's ship really so scary? Thinking about it, Doflamingo suddenly felt that he couldn't understand that familiar Buggy the Clown. In order to understand the doubts in his heart, and to leave the ghostly place like Advance City as soon as possible, Doflamingo finally made a compromise with the idea of, try it, if it doesn't work, run away. You won, Mr. 3, I can agree to join you, but the premise is that I need to give me enough privileges. After all, Doflamingo began to think about the content of privilege in his heart. However, Mr. 3's answer directly stunned him in place. Aren't you mistaken, Doflamingo? Now you are a prisoner. Whether I can save you or not depends entirely on my mood, and I have to bargain. Think our cross union is a vegetable market. There are still 20 seconds left. When recruiting Hancock and Crocodile before, the Buggy Pirates did give them quite a lot of privileges. For example, Hancock can refuse the members of the Buggy Pirates to enter Blazing Island, which is New Daughter Island, or refuse rude requests beyond his ability. As for Crocodile, he also has the privilege of moving freely and refusing boring orders. It can be said that under the premise of protecting the interests of the Clown Buggy Pirates, and obeying the reasonable dispatch of Captain Buggy, the two of them have the greatest degree of freedom. After all, the Clown Buggy Pirates at that time were seriously lacking in high-end combat power. They were poor and white. If they wanted to successfully recruit veterans like Hancock and Crocodile, they had to be given the necessary rights. Moreover, they are proud and well versed in the rules of pirates, and under normal circumstances, they would not do anything that would damage the reputation of the Buggy Pirates. But the Doflamingo in front of him is different. If this insidious, brutal and cold-blooded guy hadn't been suppressed in advance, there would definitely be many troubles after the recruitment was completed. Even with a little carelessness, it will become a ticking time bomb like Weevil. What? Want me to join you unconditionally? What kind of bastard joke? Doflamingo, who had reacted from the infinite shock, was emotional, pulling the iron chains all over his body and making a squeaky sound. If all the previous expressions were faked, then he was really angry when he was insulted at this moment. You know, even though he is afraid of Kaido, the relationship between the two parties is just an equal partnership. This is not the answer I want, you still have 10 seconds. Mr. 3 continued to choose to ignore Doflamingo's roar, and even held his nose indifferently. Mr. 3, think clearly, I am Tien Yasha, Don Quixote Doflamingo. Doflamingo's momentum rose rapidly. Then you can hold on to the name of the past, stay quietly in this dark prison, and keep reading the newspaper. Mr. 3 said in a calm tone, if you are lucky enough not to be killed by the killer, you may be able to see from the newspapers the day when we overthrow the Tianlong people's rule. Wait. What are you talking about? To overthrow the rule of the Tianlong people? Ha 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 ha. The momentum on Doflamingo's body suddenly dissipated completely, and he couldn't help laughing out loud. Ridiculous, ridiculous. If you knew how terrifying what the Tianlongren hold in their hands, you would never say anything about it. Such nonsense. Even so, so what? Even if the end of the road is death, we will still do this. Mr. Three's eyes flashed with an extremely determined look. The atmosphere has been exaggerated to such an extent, even if it is full of nonsense, he has to make it up without hesitation. One is more naive than the other. Not only will you die, but you will definitely die a miserable death. Doflamingo sneered. Don't worry, Doflamingo, the newspaper will give you the answer. The premise is that you can live to that time. Mr. Three flicked the booger from his fingernails, turned and left while talking. It's time, you should read the newspaper here. These words hit the soul directly, piercing Doflamingo's nerves like a steel needle. Read the newspaper, read the newspaper. He is really fed up with watching others stir up the world, but he can only lie flat and live a shitty life. Bastard, don't you want to get Lao Tzu's combat power? Mr. Three was unmoved, and even wanted to laugh a little. Crocodile, Empress, Weevil, and allies Katakuri, Hawkeye, or him now, which one will be weaker than Yu Ming? If we talk about the connections and channels of the underground forces, it is barely acceptable. He continued to move forward and walk towards the cell where a hot female prisoner was held. A long time ago, as a womanizer, he had noticed this sexy and beautiful big sister. Doflamingo's face was so gloomy that he finally gritted his teeth and said, "Okay, I promise you." However, Mr. Three's footsteps did not stop. The system didn't give any hint at all, so you promised me? Believe me. After all, he is an old fritter who has been in the world of pirates. If there is no system, he may really be deceived by Doflamingo's realistic acting skills. Looking at the back of Mr. Three gradually going away, Doflamingo thought of the dark period when he was imprisoned in the City of Advancement, and thought of the turbulent world in the future. At this moment, he really panicked. He, Doflamingo, didn't exist for such boring things as reading newspapers. Even if he really wants to overthrow the Tinlongren and replace him as the king of the world, it should be him himself. Mr. Three, I told you to take me away, you. Didn't you hear? The black lightning raged and burst out, and the awe-inspiring domineering arrogance suddenly burst. Feeling this terrifying aura, everyone in the audience, including Mr. Three, was stunned, and their blood and nerves became restless in an instant. Like a flash in the pan, Doflamingo's overbearing arrogance erupted under extreme anger as fleeting. Hearing the ding in the back of his mind, Mr. Three's mentor turned around decisively, and made a splash for Doflamingo's overlord. It's really terrifying to be able to burst out with such a domineering arrogance under the condition of being bound by Hylu stone and completely powerless. As he said that, he walked slowly back to the cage where Doflamingo was, and unlocked the prison door using the master key made by the wax fruit ability. Immediately afterwards, he unfastened the thick iron chains and Halushi handcuffs that bound Doflamingo. He who understands the current affairs is a hero, and this is the mighty Tenyasha. Mr. Three stretched out his palm with a smile on his face. Welcome to the Cross Guild, Doflamingo. I have written down today's humiliation, Mr. Three. If you give me a chance, you will die a miserable death. In the end it was that rebellious Doflamingo, even though his little hand was already holding hands with Mr. Three, he still didn't forget to say harsh words. Hee, if you can do it, but before that, there is one more thing. Having said that, Mr. Three paused for a moment. What's up? Doflamingo frowned slightly. He was not very knowledgeable, but unexpectedly, he could predict that what Mr. Three would say next would make him even more angry. Mr. Three hesitated for a moment, although the current situation was not suitable, but after careful consideration, he finally decided to speak. According to the style of our buggy pirates, new partners have to call me Brother Three, you see. In the New World, a large naval warship flying the flag of the Marshal. A Kainu wearing a cloak of justice stands on the bow of the warship, arms crossed, staring gloomily at the sea level ahead. Marshal Sakaski, in about half an hour, we will arrive at Kale Bali, the stronghold of the Cross Union. An adjutant walked over quickly, saluted and continued to make a report. According to the investigation of the advanced troops, the core members of the Cross Union headed by Buggy the Clown are not in Bali now. As expected. The corner of Chiquan's mouth raised slightly, and he said in a cold voice, "Sure enough, they are some cowardly rats who are afraid of death. It doesn't matter, just keep sailing. From today, Kale Bali will no longer exist. Since the clown Buggy and others chose to abandon the island and flee for their lives, he will completely destroy the stronghold of the Cross Union and completely suppress the arrogance of the Cross Union. In this way, to enhance the morale of the Navy's downturn at this time, and strengthen the Army's prestige. Give me the yellow monkey's phone bug, yes. Blue blue blue." When the phone was connected, the phone worm's face immediately changed into Kazaru's face of a wretched uncle visible to the naked eye. Moxie Moxie. A lazy voice floated out slowly. Perusalino, have you arrived at the city of Advance? Akainu asked. Not guilty yet, because of the attack at the World Conference, a little time wasted going through the checkpoint. The phone bug imitated the slightly pursed lips of the yellow monkey, but now it has passed, and it will arrive in about 5 minutes. Then I'll leave it to you. Knowing the situation, Akainu hung up the phone bug, and he still had considerable trust in the strength of his comrade in arms at the same time, Kizaru. Cross Union? Hehe. Prepare to pay a heavy price for your stupid behavior of provoking the Navy headquarters. At this time, it is not known that the highest combat power of the Navy headquarters is about to arrive in the city of Advance. The 6th layer of infinite hell. Crocodile stood there smoking a cigar. For some reason, he felt refreshed when he saw Doflamingo, whose face was livid after hearing the third brother's request. From the performance of resolutely rejecting Doflamingo's invitation 2 years ago and mocking him, it is not difficult to see that Crocodile looks down on such a sinister villain as Doflamingo from the bottom of his heart. If it weren't for Doflamingo's mature underground business contacts and resources behind him, he wouldn't even support the Cross Union, and take such a huge risk to make a big fuss in the city. But now, seeing Doflamingo, who didn't get any privileges and was so angry with Mr. 3 that he was about to explode and couldn't do anything, Crocodile just wanted to say that this trip was worth it. Mr. 3, I don't want to start a fight with you yet, just put away your wishful thinking if you are sensible. Doflamingo, who was holding back his anger, said so. Mr. 3 stared at Doflamingo's glasses fearlessly, trying to see if the eyes hidden behind were the beady eyes rumored by netizens. It's a pity that the light here is too dark, and Doflamingo's glasses are too good at blocking light, so it's hard to see the outline clearly. In desperation had to give up. As for Doflamingo's threat, to be honest, for him now, it is really useless. Not to mention the reward from the system, he is about to complete the Fruit Ability Awakening and Comprehensive Strength Enhancement. Ha ha ha, it really is as difficult to deal with as the rumors say, Brother Doflaming. Mr. 3 sighed perfunctorily, and didn't waste any more time. He turned to look at the criminal prisoners who came out of the prison cage one after another. The goggles on the bridge of his nose reflected the dim scene. Everyone, I'm sure you've all heard the conversation I had with Doflamingo just now. Time is running out, so I don't bother to talk nonsense. If you want to leave Advance City and join our Cross Union, you must have a mortal determination and a loyal attitude. These 2 points are indispensable. So, for those who are malicious towards the Cross Trade Union, keeping silent is your best choice. After all, our Cross Trade Union is not a charity. Speaking of this, Mr. 3 couldn't help but feel rejoicing. Fortunately, Blackbeard released the prisoners from the 6th floor prison 2 years ago. Although the prisoners on the 6th floor are also very strong, they are far from as strong as the group 2 years ago. Fear. For example, only one person can compete with Roger, the Red Earl of the Whitebeard Pirates, Beloric Redfield. Another example is Douglas Barrett, whose strength is infinitely close to that of One Piece Roger, known as the successor of the Ghost. For such a legend-level pirate, if he wants to join their cross guild, it's really not a good thing to be happy about. Like Hawkeye, who only maintains an ally relationship, the current buggy pirates are not yet qualified to fully control this kind of imperial combat power. Ahahaha, don't worry Mr. 3, as long as you can take me out of this ghostly place, what's the problem even if you join the Cross Union? To be precise, it is our honor to be able to join the 4 emperors. The handcuffed prisoners immediately showed great sincerity and trust. What an international joke, if you don't take the line of the Cross Union, it means you will stay forever in a place like Advance City, only a fool would refuse. As for their true inner thoughts, who knows except themselves? Very well, I feel your determination very deeply. Mr. 3's eyes swept over the crowd in front of him. Except for those unlucky people who hiccuped in the collision with Magellan's big move just now, there are a total of 12 prisoners who are willing to join the Cross Union. Among them is the one that Mr. 3 is very optimistic about, a sexy big sister with a devil figure and a coquettish face. As for the remaining small number of prisoners, they stayed quietly in their original cages. Maybe it's the grudge with the clown buggy pirates, or it's because they're afraid of the endless pursuit by the Navy, or maybe they want to escape from prison. For whatever reason, they had no intention of joining the Cross. Mr. 3 originally wanted to use the same method as Blackbeard, let the prisoners have a wave of death melee, and eliminated some useless weaklings. However, due to the appearance of Domino and the CP0 killer, it took a lot of time to deal with Magellan. Therefore, he intends to eliminate personnel in a simpler and more violent way. In this way, Mr. 3, together with the Crocodile Eka 2 and the new Doflamingo, led the 12 prisoners out of the 6th floor and came to the cell area of the 5th floor of the extremely cold hell. Mr. 3, I knew it, you can definitely do it. Bon Clay, who was waiting here, rushed over with snot and tears, and hugged Mr. 3 tightly. From Doflamingo standing next to Mr. 3, and many prisoners dressed as prisoners, we can make a very certain judgment. The real boss of the City of Advancement, Magellan, the King of Hell, has been defeated. Mr. 2, you really haven't changed at all. Crocodile puffed out smoke rings, his eyes rolled and landed on Bon Clay. When he was in the Baroque studio before, he only regarded Bon Clay as a thug who could be discarded at any time. It wasn't until the Advanced City incident that he witnessed this guy's feat of betting his life with his own eyes, that Crocodile looked at him differently and affirmed his way of a monster. Oh, Mr. Zero. President Crocodile. Hearing this, Bon Clay noticed Crocodile next to him. The sexy calf covered with hairy legs swayed, just about to offer the same affectionate hug, but Crocodile's golden hook was firmly pressed against the forehead. The moment you touch me, I will turn you into a mummy, said the ruthless and indifferent Sand Crocodile. Bon Clay was frightened by this momentum, and crouched in a corner in a low mood, drawing circles. Mr. 3 directly ignored this idiot, and walked to Ayasha, who was resting on the ground. Ayasha. Yes. Third brother. Do you still have the strength? Our goal has been achieved, and now we need to evacuate immediately. Well, as you can see, there is no problem at all. In order to prove that her state at this time would not hold her back, Ayasha stood up quickly, with firm steps and a relaxed expression. It seems that a lot of mobility has indeed been restored if you don't pay attention to the trembling hands behind your back. Mr. 3 focused his eyes slightly, and quickly saw the weakness of Ayasha hidden under the strong surface, but he didn't expose it. After all, it was her will and stubbornness. He turned to look at the many prisoners behind him, and raised his hand to make a candle key that could unlock Heilushi's handcuffs. Then, everyone, from now on, you are members of the Cross Union. On behalf of the chairperson Buggy, I welcome you to join. As soon as these words came out, the bloodshot eyes of many prisoners immediately showed extremely crazy and excited expressions. Finally, I can finally return to the sea and be free. When these prisoners raised the Heilushi handcuffs in their hands and waited with great anticipation for their release, Mr. 3 stood there without the slightest thought of unlocking them. Hey, Mr. 3, what are you hesitating about? Hurry up and open it for us. That is to say, there is not much time. If we continue to delay like this, no one knows what will happen. Mr. 3 adjusted his glasses expressionlessly. Crocodile and Katakuri understood instantly, moved their feet, and blocked the left and right sides. Ayasha, when I mentioned the Cross Union just now, who showed strong malice? Mr. 3 said coldly. Ayasha took a deep breath, and her blue eyes swept over the many prisoners who were in doubt. She guessed the third brother's intentions in advance, and she hasn't stopped feeling malicious about everyone around her since just now. Demeanor, words, and even emotions can be disguised, but it is still difficult to hide such an illusory thing as malice when one is unconscious and unprepared. What's more, these prisoners are unlikely to know Ayasha, let alone know her fruit ability in advance and take precautions. And this is exactly the final test that Mr. 3 conducted on this group of vicious guys. There are 7 people in all. After repeated confirmation, Ayasha raised her slender and fair fingers and pointed at 7 people in a row. The faces of the prisoners who were pointed at all changed drastically. The world of pirates is indeed full of deceit and deceit. Mr. 3 sighed heavily, a little unexpected that there would be such a person. It's a pity that the sexy big sister with a big heart that he is quite optimistic about is also among them. It's no wonder he. Everyone, as I said just now, I didn't really join the Cross Union. Whether you can escape from prison depends on your own ability. Since you choose to follow us, even if you have a wait-and-see attitude towards the Cross Union, I won't make it too difficult. Unfortunately, you are hostile to the Cross Union. Before the words were finished, some prisoners were the first to be unable to bear the cold and powerful oppression, jumped up in rage, raised the handcuffs in their hands, and smashed Mr. 3's head hard. Whoosh! The crescent scimitar formed by the condensed yellow sand passed through his body first, and the erosive ability of the rustling fruit was activated accordingly. Ah! Amidst a burst of shrill howls, the prisoner was drained of water, and became a mummified corpse lying on the ground. Busburno, Bloodknife, I remember you. The bounty is 9,000 million, the brutal guy who once killed and replaced his own pirate captain. Crocodile's deep voice came out as a strong proof of Ayasha's malicious judgment. In the 2 years after the Dingshang War, He had learned about most of the big pirates in the New World. The prisoner was identified as soon as they met. The remaining 6 prisoners saw that Mr. 3 and the others were so direct and decisive, and they knew that the defense was useless. After they looked at each other, they immediately reached a consensus: run away. Although they are all famous pirates in the New World, they are wearing Heilushi handcuffs in their hands at this time, and they were tortured badly by Magellan's venom before. Facing Mr. 3 and other powerhouses in this state, joining forces to resist will only make us die more decently. Click, click, click. There was the sound of iron links falling to the ground one after another. Mr. 3 released Heilushi's handcuffs from the remaining 5 people. Congratulations, thank you for your trust, you have passed the test. The faces of the 5 prisoners who had regained their freedom were full of joy, and their eyes were full of fear when they looked at Ayasha, who was dressed in black. It never occurred to them that there is such a guy who can detect hostility in the cross-union. There was Ayasha on the previous reward order, but only the title was not introduced in too much detail, so the prisoners here did not know her fruit ability. Chief of the General Staff is very polite, and thank you for letting us regain our freedom. After all, they were imprisoned in the 6th floor prison. The 5 prisoners quickly regained their composure from the shock, as well as the naturally ruthless aura. As a welcome gift for newcomers, let us wipe out all those guys who are hostile to the cross-union. The voice fell, and the 5 prisoners had reached a consensus. Among them were also those with devil fruit abilities, like Doflamingo, who regained some strength the moment Heilushi was uncuffed. Therefore, at this time, you should firmly express your position and attitude. Mr. 3 nodded slightly, agreeing to the 5 people's proposal. The 6 people who escaped were all world-class criminals who had done all sorts of bad things, and they had malicious intentions towards the cross-union, so killing them didn't have the slightest psychological burden at all. The 5 people who were affirmed immediately took action to find their own targets to hunt and kill. Doflamingo, who watched the whole process, had a little cold sweat on his forehead. Even Tien Yasha, who was in the New World, couldn't help but feel a chill when he looked at the back of Mr. 3. Obviously there is this kind of detection method, but this guy is useless, and he is so confident and accurate in judging my true attitude. Damn it. Why didn't I realize that there is such a terrifying character in Buggy Pirates? What Doflamingo couldn't figure out after scratching his head was that the reason why Mr. 3 was able to completely control him was actually the plug-in deep in his mind, the system. In the blink of an eye, the 5 newly added powerful pirates killed all the targets. Under the leadership of Mr. 3, including more than a dozen ladyboys including Bon Clay, the much stronger escape team began to move towards the 1st floor. After passing through the 4th layer of scorching hell, under the judgment of Ayasha, they brought a few prisoners including Mise Olib who really wanted to join the cross-union. Compared with the looseness of the 6th floor, the recruitment conditions for the weaker prisoners on this floor are naturally much harsher. After being rejected by the shrewd people who were hiding in the dark and watching, because of Mr. 3's terrifying strength, they could only shut up obediently and dare not raise too many objections. If you don't have enough strength and want to be free to see the sun again, you have to pay the price of betting your life. This is a natural equivalent exchange. Although there were many defensive forces advancing the city along the way, even the strongest Magellan was defeated. Naturally, these small soldiers did not dare to obstruct in the slightest, and the whole process was unimpeded. Soon, the crowd headed by Mr. 3 came to the upper floor of the city, only one gate away from the outside world. Ha ha ha. I didn't expect that one day we would actually leave this ghostly place called Jhin City. A new-age ladyboy wearing net stockings spoke a seductive tone. Unable to restrain the excitement in his heart, he rushed to open the door. However, a big sticky hand reached out, dragged it back and threw it heavily on the ground. When the ladyboy was unaware, Katakuri had already taken out a jelly bean from his trouser pocket, popped it out with a little force, and shook open the heavy door. The moment the door was opened, there was the sound of cannonballs roaring. Boom boom boom. In the next second, the heavy door panels made of special wood, together with the prison entrance, were all blasted into slag by the powerful explosion. Looking up, I saw that outside the passage, the 10 warships guarding here had already gathered in a circular encirclement, surrounding the entire advancing city. According to the report from the prison guards in the advancing city, Director Hannibal and Deputy Director Magellan have confirmed their defeat. On the leading warship, the Lieutenant General wearing a cloak of justice stood at the bow with a livid face. So, no matter who it is, as long as it appears in the field of vision, I will give it a heavy bombardment. Before General Kizaru arrives, we must completely intercept this gang of vicious criminals in the city. Yes. The sailors on deck responded most emphatically. Advance into the city. The novice monsters and ordinary pirates who had seen the power of the warship's gunfire outside all stepped back a few steps in horror. They are weak, and it is difficult for them to resist in the face of such indiscriminate bombardment. Let me go. If there are 10 warships, it will take 10 minutes at most. Crocodile stood up without hesitation. Mr. 3 and Katakuri exhausted a lot of physical strength in the battle with Magellan. Doflamingo and other prisoners on the 6th floor had just regained their freedom and were eroded by Magellan's venom. Their combat power was quite limited in a short period of time. Even the malicious kid who can help a little bit has almost reached his limit. After thinking about it, Crocodile is the only one who has the ability to quickly deal with 10 warships. Let me join you too. Bon Clay followed closely behind, and came out with coquettish ballet steps. After all, in the past 2 years, for the way of being a monster, I have done a lot of hard training. Hee, just don't die, Mr. 2. Crocodile did not refuse. Just when the two were about to forcefully rush out to deal with the warship, Mr. 3 raised his hand and stopped them. Wait a minute, Crocodile, time is running out, it's still too slow to solve one by one like this. In his plan to retreat and advance the city, they only need to jump into the sea after successfully rescuing Mingo, and they can return to the submarine safe and sound after being supported by Jinbei lurking under the sea surface. This is the main reason why Jinbei stayed in the sea the whole time and didn't follow them to advance to the city to save people. After all, his role is too important to allow any surprises. And to ensure that such a group of people, most of them are capable people, jumped into the sea without incident, there is no doubt that the warships outside must completely lose their attack capabilities. So, you already have a more efficient way? Crocatter asked. That's right, if you just make the warship incapable of attacking, it can be achieved without violent destruction. Mr. 3 raised his finger and pointed to the ceiling above his head, with a smile on his lips. We have several people here who can incapacitate Navy soldiers at the same time. The clever Crocodile instantly understood what he meant, biting his cigar and snorting coldly. It's really an unpleasant strategy. Having said that, he still affirmed the idea. Let me handle the rest of the guys who can still move. That's it. Mr. 3 gave Crocodile a thumbs up. Afterwards, he looked back at Katakuri and Doflamingo. The two of you should still have extra stamina. Let's release the domineering look, right? That's right. As a miraculous skill of Qing Zhaobing, his strategy is to release through the superimposition of triple domineering aura, so that even the elite Navy soldiers will be instantly stunned. Let's go. Katakuri with serious eyes didn't say much. Although his knowledgeable domineering can only predict the short-term future, but for some reason, there is always a long-term uneasiness in his heart. It feels like if you continue to delay like this, something bad will happen. Ha 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 ha. What an interesting proposal. Doflamingo's insolent laughter was filled with anticipation. How many guys can still stand after that? Seeing that neither of them felt any pressure, Mr. 3 turned to Crocodile and said, Crocodile, send us to the roof of the city. With a gloomy face, Crocodile raised his hand silently, and threw out a mighty Sha Lan. Boom. A sandstorm with erosive effects soared into the sky, knocking out a big hole in the ceiling of the promotion city, and then lifted the three of Mr. 3 and brought them safely to the roof of the building covered with green plants. The target has appeared, pushing the top of the tower. The Navy's response was quite quick, and hundreds of gun barrels on 10 warships turned. After locking on to the three of Mr. 3, countless pitch-black round cannonballs poured out, bang bang bang. Candle wall. The letter 3 hairstyle on Mr. 3's head ignited a raging flame, creating a cylindrical candle wall to protect the three of them in the middle. Boom 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 boom. Countless shells exploded, the flames soared into the sky, and the sound of the explosion was deafening. Gray-black smoke rises, filling the sky above the city. The firepower of the 10 warships was undoubtedly very fierce. Although Mr. 3's candle wall was strong enough, he was unable to maintain replenishment due to his lack of physical strength, and was quickly broken through. In the end, Katakuri, who was still full of strength, made a move, setting off the glutinous rice floor and adding armed domineering, blocking the first round of indiscriminate bombing. Load the shells and continue bombing. You don't want to kill those guys who are as strong as monsters, just keep them in place. The Vice Admiral commanded 10 warships, while keeping a close eye on the exit of the city to ensure that other pirates would not evacuate secretly. Just in the next second, the pupils of the Vice Admiral, who is fairly experienced in combat, shrank, and his face changed drastically. Not good. Everyone, hurry up and avoid. His perception is very keen, and his judgment is also very correct, but it is a pity that the soldiers under him do not have sufficient reaction time at all. While stunned, he pushed forward to the top of the city tower, and the dense dark red lightning burst suddenly, spreading in all directions like a spider web. 3 incomparably powerful overlord-like arrogance erupted in an instant, converging into an even more terrifying aura that enveloped the 10 naval warships. At this moment, everything in the world is eclipsed and silent, and there is only black and white in the whole world. Plop, plop, plop. Damn it! The head of the Vice Admiral's forehead kept breaking out in cold sweat, and the coercion formed by the superposition of the 3 overlord-like arrogance was so terrifying that even he, who had rich combat experience, couldn't help but feel palpitations. When he regained his senses and looked behind him, the lieutenant general wearing the cloak of justice was completely dumbfounded. In the entire warship, there were only a few major generals who barely resisted the overlord attack. Without exception, they all lost consciousness. Looking around is not a good habit, Mr. Lieutenant General. A dull magnetic sound came from the bow of the warship, and the Vice Admiral who reacted was about to draw his sword, when a desert sword quickly struck along the deck, cutting open his chest muscles, leaving a shocking bloodstain. Puff. The severely wounded Vice Admiral knelt on one knee, with blood dripping from the corner of his mouth. Crocodile frowned slightly, a little surprised that this unexpected blow did not kill the opponent. You know, in order to save time, he did his best and didn't hold back at all. Vice Admirals, they are indeed some ridiculously strong guys. Crocodile bit his cigar and walked slowly towards the Vice Admiral. Although it couldn't be solved in an instant, but with the current state of the Vice Admiral, it is impossible to be his opponent. Shemale Fist. Memoirs of that summer. On the other side, Bon Clay, who was stepping on ballet steps, moved quickly, using himself as the axis to launch a super high-speed spinning kick, attacking the few rear admirals who were still awake. These major generals have not yet recovered their composure from the deterrence of the triple domineering look, and are in extremely poor condition. They can only resist in a hurry under Bon Clay's storm like monster boxing, and retreat steadily. It didn't take too much time. Crocodile and Bon Clay quickly eliminated their opponents. At this point, 10 huge naval warships quietly floated on the windless sea, completely losing their combat capabilities. From the successful evacuation of the city, there is only the last and simplest step, jumping into the sea. Prisoners on the 5th and 6th floors and the new transvestites rushed out of the passageway of the city and stood in front of the sea level with a wide view, with their eyes slightly closed, greedily breathing the fresh air that belonged to the sea. After that, their expressions became extremely excited and even crazy. Become free. As long as they jump from here, they can be free and act recklessly in this sea again. Pushing forward to the top of the tower, Mr. 3 watched Crocodile and Bon Clay finish off the last enemy, with a relaxed and happy expression on his face. Although there have been many unexpected changes in the middle, but in any case, the promotion of the city robbery operation has been a complete success. Just when Mr. 3 was about to jump off the roof, he called out to Jinbei who was lurking under the sea. Boom. On the calm sea level in the distance, the sound of the firing of warship cannons sounded very abruptly. Everyone who had finally relaxed their nerves was startled. They subconsciously looked in the direction of the gunfire, and their scalps became numb from fright in an instant, and their eyeballs jumped out of their sockets uncontrollably. It's not because the shells hit are so special, and it's not that they can't avoid the shell's attack, but there was actually a person standing on top of the ordinary shell that hit at high speed. Short black hair with natural curls, pale yellow sunglasses, and a very iconic yellow striped shirt. The yellow-sleeved naval justice cloak draped behind him was swaying crazily in midair under the pull of the shells. This person is none other than Admiral Paluzolino, codenamed Kizaru, with the highest combat power in the Navy headquarters and a natural-type shining fruit ability. The cannonball moved very fast, and within a second or two after everyone heard the sound of the cannon and recognized the Kizaru, they arrived on the solid wall of the City of Advancement, and exploded with a boom, full of sparks. Everyone, jump into the water. Mr. 3's nerves were tense all over, and he yelled at everyone on the passageway of the city. The few transvestites standing at the front of the team reacted very quickly. Without any hesitation, they ran to the port of Jinjin City and jumped towards the calm sea. However, no matter how fast their reaction is, how could it be faster than light? Shish. Several laser beams appeared in advance of the whereabouts of several people, carrying terrifying energy and exploded at the moment of contact. Boom. After the circular yellow light circle passed, the entire port of Advanced City was directly razed to the ground. When the rest of the people saw this, they were shocked immediately, turned around one after another, and retreated to the interior of the city at a speed that was hard to catch with the naked eye. Seeing that these criminal prisoners are so knowledgeable, the Kizaru, who did not know when he appeared on the top of the mast of the warship where Crocodile and Bon Clay were located, slowly took out the communicator specially used for advancing the warship from the inside of the shirt. "Yo, I'm the Kizaru, and I've arrived." The communicator was quite quiet, and there was no sign of an answer. Moxie, is anyone there?" the yellow monkey asked again. After receiving the same silence, standing on the top of the mast, his eyeballs slowly rolled, looking at the soldiers lying on the decks of the 10 surrounding warships. "Is everyone incapacitated?" Kizaru, who wanted to inquire about the specific situation, had no choice but to give up, and looked up at the 3 Mr. 3 who were advancing to the top of the tower. "Perusalino, I didn't expect even you to be dispatched." Doflamingo stared at the Kizaru. Even though his forehead was dripping with cold sweat due to nervousness, he still asked defiantly, "Why? Do you want to prevent me from regaining my freedom?" Facing the natural terror and oppression of the admiral, he is still arrogant. I have to say, Doflamingo is really crazy. Kizaru raised his hand and slowly scratched his chin, and answered Doflamingo's question very cooperatively. "Hey, is that obvious? Then, can you please take the initiative to go back to the prison and stay there, Doflamingo? Above, but I want to find an opportunity to kill you by the way." Hearing this, Doflamingo stepped on the railing on the top of the tower and said aggressively, "Are you kidding me? I call out." The yellow laser shot out at a speed of a few tenths of a second, and with a loud boom, a shocking gap exploded on the top of the advancing tower. "Can you predict the future? You're so terribly knowledgeable and domineering, Katakuri." Kizaru withdrew his shining index finger, and the pupils under the yellow sunglasses flickered with a little surprise. Following his gaze, I saw that Doflamingo's position had changed from before, and he narrowly avoided the laser. The reason is that Katakuri, who had foreseen the attack in advance, made a move and assimilated the railing that Doflamingo stepped on into soft glutinous rice, thereby changing his position. "Bastard Pelusalino, you really want to fight with me, don't you?" Doflamingo's face was gloomy, and he opened his arms and drew out 5 color lines out of thin air. Although he hasn't recovered his fighting power after being eroded by Magellan's venom, this can't hide his desire to fight against the Kizaru. For this kind of head-on behavior, the Kizaru's response can be called simple and rude. "Then how about that?" "Shish." Kizaru's index finger moved slightly, and he raised his hand to shoot out more than a dozen intensive laser rays. A red light flashed in Katakuri's eyes, and under the blessing of the color of foreseeing the future, the dense and fast yellow laser light in front slowed down, and all the attack trajectories came into view. But even so, Katakuri frowned slightly, because he realized that even if he saw the trajectory, it was almost impossible to dodge 100%. The attack angle of the Kizaru is extremely ingenious, almost equivalent to an all-round blockade, and it is inevitable. Candle City Wall. Just as Katakuri was thinking about the countermeasures, a thick and huge candle wall rose from the ground, standing in front of the dense laser light. Boom 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 boom. The terrifying power carried by the laser light exploded in an instant, blasting the giant candle wall into dense gaps. Unexpectedly, barely resisted the attack of the General Kizaru? Shock appeared in Katakuri's deep pupils, and when he turned his head to look at Mr. 3, he just saw behind him, the hazy wax museum phantom dissipating little by little, turning into nothingness. The weird move that can restore the physical condition to near the peak? Katakuri narrowed his eyes slightly, and glanced at the broken candle wall ahead. The color of the off-white candles used by Mr. 3 is slightly different. The candles that make up this city wall are darker in color, showing a harder and thicker dark gray overall. What shocked Katakuri the most was the way the candle wall was created. It didn't overflow from Mr. 3's body, but pushed the floor and walls on the top of the city tower, and after being assimilated into candles, it was violently lifted up. A few seconds later, Katakuri regained his composure and thought of the only possibility. "Mr. 3, your fruit ability has awakened?"